My name is Juliana, 32 years old. That night, in a hall glowing with lights and filled with cheers, I thought I would receive a proposal after 4 years of giving up everything for the man I loved. But instead, he raised his champagne glass and announced before hundreds of guests, "A waitress, a cashier cannot step into my world." The entire room went silent, then curious, pitying, and even amused eyes all turned toward me. My heart felt crushed, but in that same moment, another fire quietly ignited. Have you ever given up your youth and your money to nurture someone's dream, only to be betrayed in front of everyone? Tell me where you're watching from, leave a comment to share your feelings, and don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel to keep following along with me. I once believed every sacrifice today would turn into a stable tomorrow. I believed so much I never doubted, not even when my hands grew calloused from endless dishwashing, or when I came home at night with my legs numb to the point of losing all feeling. The day he was accepted into medical school, I cried with joy. He hugged me and whispered, "We will have a wonderful future. I promise." I clung to that promise like a guiding light and willingly became the one carrying the entire burden behind him. I started taking on more jobs. In the morning, I worked at a cafe near campus. In the afternoon, I ran to an Italian restaurant. At night, I worked the cashier shift at an all-night supermarket. On some days when snow blanketed the streets and wind whipped through my coat, I still pedaled my bike home shivering. My face froze, yet my heart warmed with the thought, only a few years when he becomes a doctor, everything will change. Once my mom called, her voice full of worry, "Honey, is it worth it? Doing all this alone, how can your body take it?" I bit my lip and forced my voice to sound soft. "I'm fine, Mom. As long as he succeeds, I won't have to struggle later." I didn't dare tell her I had dropped my MBA program, or that I had sold my father's old car. That faded Ford with its sputtering engine held a piece of our family's memory. The day I handed the keys to the buyer, I stood still for a long time, my hand on the steering wheel, tears streaming down. He gently squeezed my shoulder and promised, "One day I'll buy you a brand new car 10 times better." I trusted him like a child clutching a dream. Every dollar I earned went straight into tuition, medical books, exam fees. Some months, my account had only a few dozen dollars left, yet I still wired money to him and ate instant noodles instead of rice. One time he looked at the cold bowl of noodles on the table and asked, troubled, "Don't you feel miserable?" I smiled. If this misery can buy a better tomorrow, I'll accept it. Sometimes my friends sighed when they saw me. "People in love share everything. You carry it all alone. What do you get?" I shook my head. "You don't understand. He's under so much pressure. We're building a future together." On late nights, I collapsed in the restaurant's bathroom. The manager had to carry me to a chair and he arrived late, eyes red. "I'm sorry. Only a little longer. Please endure it for now." Those words were like the only painkiller, enough to get me back on my feet and into another shift. 4 years, nearly $58,000 poured out from my hands. Not just money, it was my youth, strength, and all the chances I left behind. I could have finished grad school, worked a stable office job, traveled like my friends. But I folded it all into one path, his medical career. I still remember the second winter, snow covering everything, when he held the acceptance letter for an internship at a major hospital, his face glowing. I did it. I burst into tears, hugged him tightly, believing at last my efforts had paid off. In that moment, I truly believed every callous, sleepless night and humble meal had turned into bricks for our shared home of happiness. But faith can be a double-edged sword. It kept me standing but also blinded me to the truth. He had never shared any of those sacrifices with me. He never skipped a class to work, never sold a single possession to ease the load. I built the launch pad alone, only to be the first one pushed aside when he was ready to take off. I thought love could bridge every gap, that sacrifice would bind him to me forever. But in reality, it only led to one cruel sentence before hundreds of people: "She doesn't belong in my world." I stumbled out of that party like a lost soul. The crystal lights blurred behind me, laughter echoed like knives in my ears. With no taxi outside, I chose to walk. My heels burned my feet raw, but each step kept me from collapsing. Tears streaked down, mixing with makeup, stinging my cheeks with cold. The road back to my tiny apartment was dark and empty. I clutched my purse, chest heavy. 4 years of sacrifice, nearly $60,000, thousands of exhausting hours, all erased with one sentence from Ethan. Back at my room, I sank to the floor, leaning against the door, crying as if I had never cried before. Each sob choked in my throat. I had thought I was strong, but once the door shut and no one was watching, the raw truth hit. I was completely alone. My phone buzzed nonstop in my bag. I pulled it out, the screen lit up with a string of messages. An unknown number showed a short line. Meet me tomorrow. There are things about Ethan you don't know. I rubbed my eyes, reading it again and again. The sender was Grace, Ethan's cousin. Grace was always quiet at family gatherings. While others boasted with raised glasses, she usually sat in a corner, quietly watching. I had never been close to her, though her eyes sometimes held a flicker of sympathy for me. Why would she want to meet me now? That night I barely slept. Ethan in his black suit, his smug smile, his cold voice haunted every breath. I tossed on the narrow bed, heart pounding, torn between anger and confusion. By morning I decided to meet Grace. Maybe I had nothing left to lose. A small cafe on Main Street chimed its wind bells as I walked in. I tried to hide my swollen face after a night of crying. Grace was already seated in the corner, holding a coffee she hadn't touched. When she saw me, she stood looking a little uneasy. "Thank you for coming," she said softly. "Grace, why did you want to meet me?" Grace sighed. "Because I can't stand how Ethan and his family treat you. I know what happened last night was cruel. But there's something worse you need to know." My heart clenched. I twisted my hands together. "Tell me." Grace set her cup down, her voice trembling. "Ethan has been seeing someone else for months." The air seemed sucked out of my lungs. I forced myself to ask, "Who?" "Claire, the daughter of the department head at the hospital where Ethan is about to start his internship." That name froze me. I remembered the dinners Ethan said he had, study groups, the weekends he claimed he was on lab duty. All of it had been secret dates behind my back. Grace went on, her eyes tinged with sadness. "It's not Ethan who knows. His whole family does. They believe Claire is the right partner for a future doctor. They want Ethan to have a relationship that's a proper match." I bit my lip until it bled. "And what about me? All the years I sacrificed, the money I spent, did none of it mean anything?" Grace stayed silent. Then she placed her hand on the table. "I wanted to warn you many times. But I was a coward. My family values reputation too much. They told me not to get involved." The air in the cafe felt suffocating. I looked down at my hands, rough and trembling. Drops of coffee slipped onto the table from the spoon I held loosely. He had planned to leave me all along?" I asked, my voice breaking. "Yes. He said once he was accepted into residency, he needed a new image. Last night's public breakup was part of the plan." I laughed, the sound bitter. "So I was a pawn, a side character in his success story." Grace looked at me with guilt. "I know my apology means nothing. But I didn't want you to keep being deceived." I leaned back in my chair, staring out the window. The morning streets bustled with hurried footsteps. Yet I felt trapped inside a dark box. "Thank you, Grace. At least now I know the truth." She hesitated, then added, "If you need, I can testify. I have messages between Ethan and his mother where they discussed this." "You kept those messages?" "I kept them because I was afraid one day the truth would need to be told." A spark lit up in my mind. Deep inside, shame still burned, but now it was mixed with a cold fury. I knew my life was standing at a crossroads. Ethan had set the table to push me out. But perhaps he didn't expect that the woman who once stayed silent and devoted would be the one holding the final cards. The conversation ended when Grace left, leaving me frozen in place. Sunlight streamed through the glass, but inside me it was still dark. I recalled everything: the nights of exhaustion, the money sent away, the blind trust. And now, knowing he betrayed me with his whole family's support, I felt as if the entire foundation I had built had collapsed. I walked out of the cafe. The chilly morning air brushed my skin, making me shiver, but it also cleared my head. A thought struck me, so sharp it stopped me mid-step on the street. If they think I'm worthless, then it's time I show them my true value. I thought after talking with Grace, the emptiness inside me would fade. But the truth only made the pain heavier. Instead of anger at one man, I realized a whole group had built that cruel stage. Ethan's family knew, his friends knew. Some even reveled in my humiliation. I became the topic of hushed conversations, so loud they didn't bother to hide them. The same people who once crowded into my tiny apartment, slurping bowls of noodles I cooked while Ethan studied, now acted like they'd never known me. On social media, sly comments appeared. Sacrifice doesn't turn anyone into a doctor. Some people should know their place. Each line pierced my chest. A mutual friend, Julia, sent me a private message. Juliana, I don't know what to say, but maybe you should let go. Ethan has entered another world now. I typed back, my hands trembling. Do you think everything I did was a joke? Julia never replied again. In the days that followed, my phone rang nonstop. Ethan called. I ignored him. But by the 10th call, I had no choice but to answer. His voice was urgent, yet not a trace of remorse. You need to stay quiet. Don't make a scene. I'm about to start residency. I can't let my image be damaged. I was humiliated in public, Ethan. For years, the money, my youth. Do I not deserve even an apology? He sighed as if I were the nuisance. Juliana, you need to understand. This is for both our good. I need a clean image. And you should start a new life. Don't drag this out. I gripped the phone, every cell in my body felt crushed. So I was only a tool. Once you reached your goal, I became a burden. Don't say that. I'm grateful to you. But love and career can't coexist when they're not equal. A hollow laugh escaped me, tears streaming uncontrollably. Thank you for telling me the truth. At least now I know my worth in your eyes. I hung up and collapsed into the rickety wooden chair in the kitchen. The small apartment had never felt so cold. I looked around, the worn walls still lined with bills and the photos of Ethan holding me, promising a bright future. Now they were proof only of my own foolishness. The next day I walked into the cafe that had once been our regular hangout with mutual friends. The atmosphere was lively until I entered. Then laughter dimmed. A few glances flicked my way, then turned back. A murmur cut through the room. She gave up everything and still ended up nothing more than a waitress. I heard every word. They stung sharper than any insult from Ethan. My heart twisted, but clarity seeped in. The entire world around Ethan had united to turn me into a shadow. A shadow that worked endlessly, gave everything, and was discarded once no longer needed. I stayed still in the darkened apartment, the street's glow bleeding through the curtains. The silence was so sharp it magnified the pounding in my chest. I thought of every excuse I had once made for Ethan. He's busy studying. He's under pressure. Things will change once he succeeds. Now those words sounded like a cruel joke. I realized I had turned myself into an unconditional servant. And because of that, in Ethan's eyes, and in his family's, I was nothing more than a debt to be erased. A tool used up, tossed aside without a single word of genuine thanks. I pulled open an old drawer, dragging out stacks of papers yellowed with time. Tuition bills, receipts for books, lease contracts I signed so he could live near campus. Each sheet was like a blade, reminding me of what I had given up. The phone buzzed again. A text from Ethan. I'll say it again. If you stay quiet, we both stay safe. If you stir things up, you gain nothing. Think carefully. I stared at the screen, my fingers tightening. Once, a single message from him was enough to make me drop all pride and run to him. But now, those words only confirmed what I already knew. In his eyes, I had never been a partner. I was only a shadow he could control. I switched off the phone and let the stillness stretch for hours. Loneliness spread through the tiny room. But another truth began to surface. The fear was gone. I no longer trembled at the thought of losing Ethan, because I had never truly had him. The whole world had turned its back. Mutual friends stayed silent, his family sneered, and Ethan wanted to silence me to protect his image. But in that moment, another fire rose inside me. Not blind love, but fury and the hunger to reclaim myself. I sat at the small desk in my apartment, the yellow lamp casting light over piles of papers. For days I hadn't dared open that drawer, knowing it held all the memories of 4 years past. But now I felt no fear. I pulled it open, the rusty hinge creaking, and before me was a trove of records I had carefully kept. Tuition bills, book receipts, bank transfers, all in my name. I flipped through them, the numbers dancing before me. $2,500 for the first semester, $715 for anatomy textbooks, $3,200 for exam fees. Together, nearly $58,000. I didn't need a calculator. That number had been burned into me long ago because it represented my youth, my strength, my very blood. I stopped at another set of documents, the forms I had once filled out for Ethan. I remembered one night he spread the papers on the kitchen table, laughing wearily. "You're better at this administrative stuff than I am. Can you help me? I want to focus on studying." Back then I felt proud. I thought I was his partner, contributing to his success. So I diligently filled in each line, sealed each envelope, even mailed them at the post office. But now, flipping back, my eyes caught a detail. On his application for a medical license, his college graduation date was listed as December. Yet the official copy of his diploma showed May of the following year. A gap of nearly half a year. I remembered questioning it then, but Ethan brushed it aside. "Doesn't matter as long as they accept it. Who checks small things like that?" I pressed my lips together. Maybe I overlooked it back then, but now it was different. With strict licensing boards, a date discrepancy could mean everything. And I was the only one who still had both documents, the proof of a fatal flaw. I kept digging and soon found a stack of printed emails. They were messages Ethan had sent me late at night. "Write the research achievements for me, add a few details to make it impressive." I had obeyed, typing flowery descriptions of joining clinical projects, assisting genetic research. In reality, he had only dropped by a handful of lab sessions, yet on paper it became a project he nearly led. Reading them now, my hands shook. I had built for him a perfect portrait on paper. A portrait that wasn't real. And now, with him turning his back on me, those very words could become the rope tightening around his own neck. I leaned back in the chair, closed my eyes. It felt like I was sitting between two cliffs. On one side the pain of betrayal, on the other a trove of evidence that could shake Ethan's entire career. I sighed, ran a hand through my messy hair and whispered, "This is everything you dismissed. This is the part of my life you wanted to erase, but I won't let it go." In the past, I was so afraid of losing him that I abandoned my own pride. But now, looking at the stack of invoices and the files covered in my handwriting, I knew he was the one who should be afraid. He depended on me not only for money but for details he never cared about. And I was holding the keys to the very career he was building. I took out a notebook and started writing. First line, college graduation date, off by 6 months. Second line, research achievements, exaggerated. Third line, educational expenses, total $58,000, all invoices kept. As the pen moved across the pages, my heart steadied. I was no longer the woman abandoned at a party. I was returning to myself. A person who can calculate, who can plan, and this time I was planning not to lift him up but to save myself. Outside, the night wind blew through the window, gently rustling the curtain. I looked up and saw my faint reflection in the glass. That face looked tired, but the eyes were brighter than ever. I gathered the papers and placed everything into a black briefcase. I locked it carefully and set it on the table. Tomorrow I would decide my next step. But at least I had reclaimed a part of my strength that had long been hidden by blind love. The news arrived faster than I expected. 2 days after I sent the first documents to the medical board, Ethan called me non-stop. I didn't answer. Then, instead of his voice, someone else's voice sounded outside my apartment door. I opened the door and there stood his mother, Margaret Miller. She was usually elegant, always in expensive dresses with a cold gaze when she looked at me. But today that proud exterior was gone. She stood on the threshold, hands clasped, eyes anxious. "Juliana, we need to talk." I crossed my arms, keeping my voice even. "I don't think we have anything left to discuss." With a steady inhale, she crossed the threshold once I moved out of the way. In the small apartment, she seemed a bit awkward, as if realizing for the first time the life I had lived for the past 4 years. "The medical board has reached out," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "Ethan said they're reviewing his file, and if this is blown up, his career is as good as over." I pulled out a chair and sat, eyes fixed on her. "That's right. And what do you want me to do?" She swallowed hard and lowered her voice. "I know we may not have treated you fairly before. But now please reconsider. Don't ruin Ethan's future. You'll gain nothing from it except resentment." I let out a cold laugh. "You think I'm doing this to get something? I lost 4 years, lost my youth, lost my chance at education. Also, he could have today. And now, after he publicly humiliated me in front of hundreds of people, you come asking me to not ruin Ethan's future?" Her face flickered, then seemed to collapse. "He was wrong, I know. But everyone makes mistakes. Juliana, consider it a debt. You owe him one forgiveness." "I don't owe Ethan anything." On the contrary, he and your whole family owe me. They owe me the years I lost. Right then there was another knock. This time it was Ethan's father, Anthony Miller, with Grace standing behind him. Anthony was usually dignified, but today he looked worn out. "Juliana," he said, voice hoarse, "we can settle this quietly. We're willing to compensate you. Name your price and we'll pay. But please withdraw what you submitted." I looked at him, then at Grace. Her eyes were still on me, full of remorse. I replied slowly, "Interesting. When I needed even a sliver of acknowledgement, no one cared. Now that Ethan's career is shaking, the whole family comes to bargain with me. Do you think money can buy back 4 years of my life?" Margaret turned to her husband, snapping, "I told you we should never have let her near Ethan in the first place." Grace suddenly spoke up, her voice firmer than usual. "Enough. She's endured enough. Without Juliana, Ethan would never have gotten into med school, never had the chances he has today. You're the ones begging her, yet you still refuse to admit it." I nodded slightly to Grace, gratitude rising in my chest. I turned to Ethan's parents and spoke slowly, each word clear. I stayed quiet for too long. But from the moment he publicly cut me off, I understood that silence only turned me into a shadow. Those 4 years are gone for me. Now it's Ethan's turn to face the truth. Margaret paled as if she wanted to say something, then didn't. Anthony sighed and stepped back. They left, the door closing behind them, leaving a heavy silence in the apartment. My hand resting on the file in the black briefcase. My heartbeat was steady, no longer trembling like before. I knew I had crossed a line. There was no room left for pity or compromise. From now on, I wouldn't let anyone decide my worth again. Outside, the yellow streetlights washed over the pavement, casting my shadow on the glass. That silhouette was no longer the outline of someone forgotten, but of a woman ready to claim justice with everything she had. That party had been held in the grand hall of the city's most luxurious hotel. Hanging on the high wall, a banner read, "Congratulations to Ethan Miller on signing a residency contract with Metropolitan University Hospital." Crystal chandeliers blazed, tables were draped in pristine white linens, and wine glasses shimmered in the hands of sharply dressed guests. Everything was perfect, except for the truth I was about to bring. Grace walked beside me, her hand gripping my arm as if to pass me strength. She whispered, "Are you sure about this?" I nodded slightly, eyes fixed on the scene ahead. It's time he faced it. Not just with me, but with everyone who believed in a false image. Music floated through the air, guests chatting brightly. In the center of the hall, Ethan stood in a brand new suit, face radiant, raising his glass to greet each person. Beside him was Claire in a striking red dress, eyes full of pride. She rested her head on his shoulder as if the role of future doctor's wife already belonged to her. When the MC invited Ethan to speak, the hall fell silent. He took the mic, his voice crisp and confident. "Thank you to family, friends, and colleagues for being here to share my joy today. This is the most important milestone of my life." I stepped forward as all eyes followed him. My heels echoed on the marble floor. Ethan froze. Claire frowned in annoyance. A murmur rippled through the crowd. "She's here. Ethan's ex. What's going on?" My voice rang clear without a mic. "Sorry to interrupt, but before everyone raises a glass, I believe the truth needs to be told." Ethan hurried down, hissing under his breath. "Juliana, what are you doing? Get outside now." I met his eyes, calm. "No, Ethan. It's time you heard what you've tried to hide." I opened the case and pulled out the documents I'd prepared. "This is your medical licensing application. In it, your college graduation date is listed as December. But here is the official copy of your diploma. May. A discrepancy you never corrected. And this." I held up the printed emails. "These are the parts you had me fill in, where you inflated your research achievements, turning a few appearances into a full clinical project." A loud stir swept the room. Doctors and hospital administrators exchanged uneasy looks. Claire's face drained, she quickly pulled away from Ethan's arm. I continued, my voice steadier. "And finally, here are all the invoices, receipts, and bank statements. In total, nearly $58,000. The money I paid over 4 years so you could have today. Tuition, books, exam fees. All covered by someone who doesn't belong in your world." I set the stack of papers down on a nearby table. The hall went still, hospital executives leaning toward one another, their faces grave as they exchanged hurried words. An older doctor, likely the program director, spoke up. "Ethan Miller, can you explain these details?" Ethan hurriedly grabbed the microphone, his voice cracking. This is an administrative mistake. I never meant to. Juliana is blowing this out of proportion because of our personal relationship. Please don't believe her." I gave a faint smile. If it were only an administrative mistake, why did you hide it? Why did you ask me to write your achievements? And if I were a bitter ex, would I have original documents, invoices, and emails to show everyone here today? Ethan was speechless. Claire flushed red, snatched up her purse, and nearly ran out. Margaret covered her mouth, while Anthony stood still, eyes full of disappointment. A hospital HR representative declared firmly, "We will immediately forward this file to the medical board for investigation. And until a conclusion is reached, your residency contract is suspended." Murmurs erupted across the room. Ethan turned pale, tossed the microphone aside, and rushed toward me. He dropped to his knees in front of everyone, his voice shaking. "Juliana, please. Don't do this. I've lost everything. Whatever you want, I'll do it. Just take it back." For years I had dreamed of seeing him on his knees, but in a proposal promising forever. That moment did come, but in a far more humiliating setting. I drew a deep breath, lifted my head high. Without another word, I turned and strode past the hundreds of eyes on me. My steps were steady, no longer weighed down by pain or pity. Behind me, I heard Ethan choke on my name, the screech of chairs, the rumble of whispers. But it all blurred away, leaving only the steady beat of my heart. I knew I had crossed a line I could never return from. My small apartment still smelled of leftover morning coffee when there was a frantic knock at the door. For a split second I went rigid, pulse thundering in my ears. I knew exactly who it was. When the door swung open, Ethan stood there, a shadow of the proud man he once was. His shirt wrinkled, tie undone, eyes bloodshot as if he had cried all night. He stepped in, collapsing to his knees on the tile, voice breaking. "Juliana, I'm begging you. I've lost everything. The contract is suspended, the medical board is investigating. If you don't retract, my career is over. I was wrong. I'll repay every cent, every dollar. Just give me one more chance." I closed the door, standing a distance away. The yellow light from the ceiling cast his shadow long across the floor, like a criminal begging for pardon. My gaze held steady on him, the fear gone, replaced by sheer weariness. "What good are your tears now, Ethan?" I asked, voice calm. "Those tears aren't for me. You cry because you lost your career, your image, your dream." He lifted his tear-streaked face. "No. I cry because I lost you. I admit it, I was blind, chasing status. But I love you. We can start over." I laughed bitterly. "Start over? After everything I gave? After 4 years and nearly $60,000, you shamelessly humiliated me in front of hundreds? And your love came far too late." He bowed his head, his voice hoarse. I know I don't deserve it. But forgive me, Juliana. Please forgive me. Forgiveness isn't about going back. Forgiveness is for me to be free. Do you understand? I don't want to carry hatred, but that doesn't mean I'll ever stand beside you again." Ethan shook his head again and again, as if clutching at something slipping away. "I'll repay it all. Whatever proof you have, I'll sign a debt. I'll work my whole life to return it. Whatever you want, I'll do. Do you think I need money? If money could buy back my youth, my strength, the dreams I abandoned, then maybe I'd agree. But money can't." He fell silent, his shoulders trembling. I knew he was waiting for me to unleash the final card, the evidence of his fabricated research. The proof that could destroy him instantly. But I didn't. I met his eyes and spoke clearly. "I could submit those emails where you had me inflate your achievements. In one day your career would be finished. But I won't. I'm stopping here at the safe line. The rest, you'll collapse on your own." Ethan's eyes widened in disbelief. You won't expose them?" "No, I don't need to. You've already ruined yourself. I won't make myself into someone obsessed with destroying you. All I need is my own freedom back." He bit his lip, then broke down in sobs. For the first time in 4 years, I saw Ethan without his confident armor. But instead of pity, I felt only calm. I walked to the window, looking out at the blurred streetlights. "I once thought love could save everything," I said, back-turned. "But love cannot save someone who refuses to save himself." Behind me, his voice cracked. Juliana, I'm sorry. Truly. I could go back. I turned, cutting him off. There are no ifs left. The only thing you need to do now is live with the consequences you created. I saw the moment hope left his eyes, replaced by emptiness. I stepped to the door, opened it, and pointed outside. You should go. We're finished here. He stared at me for a long time, as if memorizing me one last time. Finally, he whispered, I lost the most precious thing in my life. I held his gaze steady until the door closed behind him. 6 months passed faster than I expected. In the days after that fateful party, I thought I'd never rise again. But life is strange. Once you've hit rock bottom, the only way left is up. Under pressure from the medical board, Ethan was forced to repay me nearly $60,000 I had poured out over 4 years. He didn't do it out of guilt, but because his lawyer advised him. If he didn't pay, the investigation would only get worse. I accepted the money not as a debt collector but as reclaiming the years I had lost. And I chose to use it to begin a new chapter. I chose Seattle, a city with a modern pace yet still dotted with peaceful corners. On a street near the university, I found an old brick-front house. I immediately saw myself in it, worn, a little scarred, but still holding the promise of rebirth. I signed a long-term lease and spent weeks repairing every detail. Wooden shelves for books, a long table for students to study, and a small corner for the coffee machine. On opening day, the sign Cafe Books, Chapter 9, hung on the glass door, like a reminder that I had stepped into a new chapter of my life. The first customers were students from around campus. They sat reading, doing homework, sipping hot coffee. A few even smiled as I walked by and said, "Thank you for opening this place. We've needed a spot like this for a long time." That sentence warmed my heart. I had never thought the pain I went through could turn into a space where others found peace. Alongside opening the shop, I also returned to school to finish my MBA program. Coming back to the classroom after many years away, I felt lost at first. But then I ran into Brooks, the economics professor I had served coffee to many times when I worked at the old cafe. He was a man in his 50s, tall and lean, with sharp yet kind eyes. Brooks often stopped by my shop after his lectures, a stack of books in hand, and we started talking. One evening, when the shop had quieted down, Brooks set his cup down and said, "Juliana, I've heard your story. I know you once supported a med student with your own labor. I think we could do something for low-income students so they won't have to go through what you did." From that idea, we started a small fund together. I contributed what was left from the money Ethan repaid, and Brooks connected with colleagues and friends. We named the program Hands Without Chains. The goal was to support medical students from poor backgrounds so they could study through their own effort, not by trading away someone else's youth or love. In the first sessions, when a group of freshmen came to the shop, I saw myself from years ago. A girl with hastily tied hair, dark circles under bright eyes. A boy in a worn jacket, hands shaking as he signed the scholarship papers. I poured them coffee and said softly, "Just promise me one thing. Never look down on those who helped you. Walk the whole road on your own feet, and if one day you succeed, come back and lift someone else up." My book and coffee shop gradually became a community hub. Older folks stopped by to read the paper. Kids sat in a corner with comic books. Students worked in groups late into the night. Some evenings, an elderly woman would share her life story with the students gathered around a table, while I stood behind the counter, quietly watching. I could see clearly that this was not just a small shop. It was a home for souls in need of a place to lean on. Brooks often joked, "Juliana, you didn't open a shop, you're building a community." I smiled. In truth, I was making amends to myself. I wanted to turn the years of being looked down on into something beautiful, no longer just a bitter memory. One rainy night, I locked up late. Streetlights reflected through the glass, washing over shelves that still smelled of fresh wood. I stopped and took in the whole space, a strange calm settling over me. If I hadn't been betrayed back then, I might never have been strong enough to build this. One autumn afternoon, as the sunset stretched across Seattle's streets, I sat behind the counter flipping through the local paper. The headline on page 3 read in bold, "Dr. Ethan Miller's medical license revoked for 5 years due to file violations and breach of standards." The article added that he was working as a health insurance salesman at a small company, a stable job, but without the glamour of the medical path he had once walked with his head held high. I folded the paper and set it aside. No triumphant smile, no tears. Instead, a quiet peace rose in me. He had reached that end on his own, and I didn't need to do anything more. The last light of day streamed through the glass, glinting off the wooden shelves and the small potted plants in the corners. The laughter of a few students still studying echoed softly, mingling with the warm scent of coffee. I looked at it all and felt how simple yet complete everything was. Brooks walked in with a stack of documents for the scholarship program. He set them down and smiled. "Tomorrow we have 4 more students receiving support. The seeds you planted have started to sprout." I poured him a cup of coffee and answered gently, "I want them not to pay with love or youth the way I did." He looked at me with sincere respect. "Juliana, you turned pain into something good for others. That is the greatest victory." I nodded slightly. In my mind, a flash of Ethan appeared, on his knees, begging in that dazzling hall. And then his image faded into today's news. The anger and hatred had drained away, leaving only quiet acceptance. Instead, he was simply a closed chapter of the past. A group of regulars came in, the wind chime jingling. I greeted them with a smile, then looked out through the window at the sky glowing red as it slid into night. My heart whispered slowly, "Best revenge isn't destroying someone. It's living a life they can't touch. The sweetest revenge isn't dragging someone down. It's rising into a life they'll never reach." Customers sipped coffee and turned pages. A student looked up and asked me, "Juliana, why is the shop called Chapter 9? I smiled and replied, "Because for me, the 9th chapter is the one that opens a new life. A chapter you write with your own hands, no longer letting others decide it." He nodded, eyes shining, then bent back over his book. Outside, the sun had fully set, leaving only the last streaks of orange across the horizon. I stood there watching the moment, feeling a serenity I couldn't have imagined 4 years ago. If one day someone were to ask me, "Do you regret it?" I would say no. Because from loss I learned how to rebuild my life. I kept standing there watching the streetlights spill through the glass, thinking about everything that had passed. Sometimes I wonder, has anyone among you ever felt what I felt, giving your youth to someone only to receive betrayal and contempt in return? We can all choose different ways to strike back, but I believe nothing is stronger than living a life that those who hurt us can no longer touch. Forgiveness isn't to forget. It's to lay down the burden and move forward, lighter and steadier. What do you think? In my situation, would you choose to forgive or to fight to the end? Leave your thoughts in the comments. I truly want to hear your stories and perspectives. And if these stories resonate with you, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so we can keep walking into new journeys together, where we explore the hidden corners of family, love, and the quiet strength it takes to rise after a fall. Because who knows, somewhere in the stories to come you might find yourself.